Humza Yousaf wins the battle to take over as SNP leader, but does it bring their dream of independence any closer? It was tight, 52% of the votes finally getting him over the line, but as Peter got the first word in with the new leader, he was straight out of the traps on the key question.
So when can the Prime Minister expect to hear from you?
The UK, straight away I'd hope
You're going to be asking for a Section 30 right away?
Of course.
Humza Yousaf's election marks a milestone, the first Muslim party leader. But with many challenges ahead for the SNP and a party deeply divided, what are his prospects? Peter will join us. Also on News at 10 tonight.
What's your message to the British press? Good morning. Good morning.
Why Prince Harry made a surprise appearance at the High Court in the privacy case against the Daily Mail. Yet another school atrocity in America. A woman kills 3 children and 3 adults in Nashville. From homeless to this, the shocking conditions families are forced to live in and the private landlords making millions from taxpayers. Daniel's latest investigation and
then
testimony from Gwyneth Paltrow's ski accident accuser and her reactions to him in court.
This is ITV News at 10 with Julie Etchingham.
Good evening. The newly announced SNP leader wasted no time today in demanding a fresh independence referendum for Scotland. Humza Yousaf had barely left the stage of his victory speech when he told us he'll ask Westminster for the necessary powers right away. While his leadership victory had been by no means certain, the margin far tighter than expected, for better or worse, he was widely viewed as the continuity candidate. But he's also a man of many firsts, the first Muslim and first British Asian, now set to become Scotland's First Minister tomorrow. He inherits from his predecessor Nicola Sturgeon a governing party in turmoil, acknowledging today there are divisions to heal.
It has been a fractious 5-week contest, but today it was a high five for his daughter that gave the news away. Humza Yousaf had just been told what was about to be announced to the rest of us.
I therefore declare Humza Yousaf duly elected as the Scottish National Party leader.
It was close. Yousaf's 52% versus 48% for the socially conservative Christian candidate Kate Forbes, another sign of a deeply divided SNP. In his acceptance speech, he was then prophetic in what would be his next fight today.
I have had my fair share of battles with the UK government over the years, and there may well be some to come. I will work with them and other devolved nations constructively where I can.
This self-branded continuity candidate then told me he will continue where Nicola Sturgeon left off, colliding over the constitution with the UK government.
You've said that Scotland will be independent in 5 years' time. You've said your preference is not for the de facto referendum. So how on earth will Scotland get independence?
So I hope we can get independent in 5 years. The way we get independence is making sure we get that consistent majority for independence. We do that, just as we did for the Scottish Parliament, then those political obstacles will fall away and they will dissipate.
Now, despite Brexit, despite Boris Johnson, Nicola Sturgeon never managed to get that sustained majority. So if you don't get sustained majority, will there be no request for another referendum?
There will always be a request because we stood on a platform of Section 30, of a mandate for a referendum. We've won the election after election after election.
So when can the Prime Minister expect to hear from you?
The UK, straight away I'd hope
You're going to be asking for a Section 30 right away?
Of course, we've been asking for a Section 30.
Peter.
We've been asking for a Section 30 for a long time. And we'll continue to ask for a Section 30.
The UK Prime Minister's spokesperson says their response will be well established. In other words, just as he said to Nicola Sturgeon, it's still a no.
The UK government, Rishi Sunak, has been very clear about it, yet they are going to prioritise another independence referendum over sorting out our NHS, improving our education system and getting on top of the cost of living crisis that is affecting individuals and families all across the country.
Labour will be hoping the departure of Nicola Sturgeon leaves a door open for them to make gains again in Scotland, especially since the new SNP leader polls poorly with the Scottish public.
We have to, with humility, reach out, earn people's trust, earn their support and demonstrate what change looks like for Scotland. And that's why we are determined to make Labour the change Scotland needs.
The man now running Scotland's party of government was first elected to Holyrood in 2011.
I, Hamza Haroon Yusuf.
He now becomes the first Muslim First Minister. He worked closely with his predecessor, quickly marked out as a rising star of the SNP, but in government he earned a reputation for being gaffe-prone.
How will Hamza Yusuf, First Minister, be received by the Scottish public?
Though he has won the support of the party members, he's not very popular with the public at large. He may never achieve the stratospheric levels of support that Nicola Sturgeon achieved at her peak, but he does need to do a lot better than he has done.
After 8 years, the Sturgeon era is now over, though the Yusuf era has begun with a familiar constitutional clash.
And Peter joins us now from Edinburgh. Apart from the myriad challenges ahead for Hamza Yusuf, what does this ultimately mean for Scottish independence at this juncture, Peter?
Well, I think that the UK government will probably be surprised by his move today and quite comfortable with it, because they were comfortable continuously saying no to Nicola Sturgeon, and it worked. Eventually she ran out of road, she ran out of room, and she admitted that she had nowhere else to go with this strategy. So why on earth is Hamza Yusuf repeating a tried and failed strategy to get independence? There is a feeling among the SNP that if they keep showing this democratic deficit, that Scotland demands independence, Westminster says no, that there will be a surge in support for their cause. Again, that didn't happen for Nicola Sturgeon. For some reason, Hamza Yusuf believes it will happen with him. He has some different magic touch to this. It's also important to stress that he has just over half of his own party that's voted for him. Just under half did not. It is a party completely split and divided right now, and he is championing a cause that is not particularly popular with the Scottish people, the majority of the Scottish people. So we'll have to go from Hamza Yusuf making promises that were popular with the members to Hamza Yusuf who's capable of being First Minister and running a country.
OK, Peter, thank you very much indeed for that. Now, of all the high-profile claimants in the High Court today, it is Baroness Doreen Lawrence's submission that could prove the most impactful. She alleges that the publisher of the Daily Mail, the newspaper which led the campaign against her son's racist killers, was for decades monitoring her phone, her bank accounts and her movements. Associated Newspapers denies that, and allegations from others, including Prince Harry, who appeared today, and Elton John, and wants the whole thing dismissed without trial.
Toxic tabloid intrusion helped drive him out of the UK. Now, allegations of criminal newspaper tactics have drawn Prince Harry back.
ITV News here. What's your message to the British press? Good morning. Good morning. Are you feeling confident today, Harry?
To once again clash with the press.
You said it's your duty to expose wrongdoing by the British media.
In a court battle against the Daily Mail and Mail on Sunday. Rarely has the High Court hosted such a guest list. Elton John and his husband David Furnish, and actress Sadie Frost. A cross-section of British VIPs, from royalty to racism campaigner. But Baroness Doreen Lawrence is the most damaging accuser. When her son was murdered, she praised the Daily Mail for helping in her struggle for justice, the tabloid famously printing this front page. But now she believes she was exploited to generate headlines, fearing trusting the Daily Mail meant she failed her murdered son. Because it's claimed Associated Newspapers paid 10 different private investigators to habitually target her for up to 14 years. Alleged voicemail hacking, landline tapping, the monitoring of her bank accounts and corrupt payments to police officers.
We had the transcripts and we have the end product, which is the hacked product to the Mail on Sunday.
Last week, ITV News interviewed the former private investigator Glenn Mulcair. Today, he was named in court papers. The Mail on Sunday accused of paying to illegally target the Lib Dem MP Simon Hughes. The court also heard the Mail on Sunday illegally obtained the birth certificate of Elton John's first child before he'd seen it. And it's claimed a private investigator hired by the Mail on Sunday bugged Liz Hurley's home and Hugh Grant's car to get information about her pregnancy.
Who is policing them?
Prince Harry's spoken about the trauma of press intrusion. Today it was claimed Associated Newspapers paid private investigators to listen to his friends' landline calls and blag information about his girlfriends.
Court 76 was packed with journalists and lawyers. Elton John managed to secure a seat in a back corner while Prince Harry sat with his legal team taking notes. There's no requirement for them to be here for this preliminary hearing. Prince Harry wants to be seen taking on the tabloids.
Lawyers for Associated Newspapers say the claims have been brought too late and should be struck out. The judge will decide whether these explosive allegations go to trial.
And Rebecca, we've heard from Associated Newspapers tonight.
Yeah, Associated Newspapers say that a key person who gave evidence in the claimant's case has now, a private investigator, has now switched to deny those allegations. They say while the Mail's admiration for Baroness Doreen Lawrence remains undimmed, they are profoundly saddened that she's been persuaded to bring this case. The paper says it remains hugely proud of its pivotal role in campaigning for justice for Stephen Lawrence, and it vigorously denies all the claims against it.
OK, Rebecca, thank you very much indeed. Now, the full and dreaded horror of the United States gun problem befell another school community this morning, this time a primary school in Tennessee, where a 28-year-old woman shot dead 3 children and 3 staff members. As President Biden said tonight, gun violence is ripping at the soul of the nation.
Once again, America is confronting the horror of gun violence at its schools. This time, ambulances and armed police were rushing to a mass shooting at a private elementary school in Nashville. Parents consoling each other as they waited to find out who'd survived and who had not. There have been 33 incidents of gunfire at schools this year. What marked out this was the shooter.
We have identified the suspect as a 28-year-old female white, actually a Nashvilleian or lives in the Nashville area.
Unlike in the Uvalde shooting, this time the police response was astonishingly swift. 14 minutes after the first 911 call, the shooter had been killed. Here there was also a reminder of just how much these attacks are now a regular and unwelcome feature of American life.
My son and I survived a mass shooting over the summer. I am in Tennessee on a family vacation. How is this still happening? How are our children still dying, and why are we failing them? Gun violence is the #1 killer of children and teens. It has overtaken cars.
These scenes are painfully reminiscent of the Sandy Hook massacre more than a decade ago. Yet since then, little has changed, as America still struggles to protect even the most vulnerable from gun violence. Dan Rivers, News at 10 in the United States.
In the 2 years since we began our investigation into Britain's housing crisis, we've exposed many appalling cases of dire conditions in council homes, as you will probably remember. But tonight, how the issue extends well beyond the diminished stock of local authorities. We've seen examples of private landlords, some being paid millions of pounds by the taxpayer, providing mouldy, damp and substandard homes that residents simply do not feel safe in. And these residents are already amongst the most vulnerable because they otherwise would be homeless.
It appears from every angle to be a derelict building. The broken windows, the battered brick, suggest little sign of life, or of the millions of pounds of taxpayers' money paid to the private company to house homeless families inside. But there is life inside these Birmingham flats, lives feeling as abandoned as this building looks.
When I say it's bad, it's real, real bad.
This tenant does not want to show her face. Such is the shame she feels about the state of the home she and her 2 children have been placed in by Birmingham City Council when they became homeless. She has placed black bin liners in the window frames to shield them from the draft. The flats are run by Global Property Management.
I tell them, oh, I'm sick. I'm using the pump. I'm reaching nowhere.
How many times would you say you've complained to the council and to Global about
50 million times.
Just all the time?
When I call them and so they look down on you, you know?
They look down on you?
Like speak to you like they are above. We are in temporary accommodation and it's still like, what, we are nobody?
Global Property Management have received £3.7 million from Birmingham City Council since 2019. Councils have a duty to help house homeless families, but a shortage of homes means councils increasingly turn to private companies. We've discovered that since 2019, private housing firms have been paid over £867 million to provide at least 84,000 families with temporary accommodation. Kensington and Chelsea Council spent the most, giving £116 million to private providers. Birmingham had the biggest bill outside the capital at £41 million. And these are the companies benefiting. Property management firm Elliott Lee got nearly £26 million since 2019, followed by AJ Bush with £20 million. We approached these companies. Those who responded insist they attempt to provide the best service and accommodation possible. Back in Birmingham, we've come to the home of Global's director to see if he feels they're providing a good service.
I'm a journalist from ITV News.
But we couldn't find him, either here or at the firm's office.
Instead, Global Property Management have said to us in a statement, homeless tenants can cause too much damage to the properties as they have nothing to lose. You cannot sue them for damage as they are claiming benefits. And tenants from hot countries do not open their windows as they feel cold.
One of the biggest earners of taxpayers' money is Theory Housing Management Services. We found at least 6 councils have paid them £12.2 million since 2019. We've received multiple complaints about Theory, including at this former office block in East London. Dirty carpets, cracked walls, mould inside several flats. But the big concern here is the security.
It can be terrifying at times.
Michael was placed here with his partner and young daughter in this one-bed flat. But last year he noticed money going missing. So he set up a small camera in their bedroom. And to his horror, it captured the caretaker of the building, employed by Theory, letting himself into their home, rummaging through their belongings, before allegedly stealing money from the wardrobe.
Anger was the first thing, but it was also a feeling of fear. It could have been a situation where she would have been home alone with the baby. I don't really feel safe living here, but we don't really have a choice.
We understand this caretaker no longer works here. When we asked Theory, they said they don't comment on individual employees.
Morning, ITV News.
So we visited the company's director at his home in North London.
We're seeing the conditions that people live in and we've seen the amount of money that you guys get.
Instead, in a statement, Theory said they always aim to provide the best service and residents have their details to report any issues. Birmingham City Council have told us they're now finding alternative homes for those still in properties managed by Global. And tonight, the Housing Secretary has ordered government officials to urgently investigate our findings. Daniel Hewitt, News at 10.
To Israel now, where with tens of thousands demonstrating on the streets, the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu finally offered a concession of sorts over his controversial judicial reforms. There will be, he announced, a delay in the hope, he said, of avoiding civil war. Enough tonight for unions to call off their general strike, but protesters still want the overhaul scrapped entirely.
Even in a country with such a turbulent history, the internal strife now engulfing Israel is unprecedented. Today, 100,000 protesters made it to the government's front door, laying siege to Israel's parliament. They were demanding that the Prime Minister scrap plans to weaken the Supreme Court so it can no longer overrule laws passed by the government.
Since the day and hour it was sworn in, the most right-wing and religious government in Israel's history has set about becoming the most powerful one as well. And as it has dawned on secular Israelis exactly what the consequences of unrestrained governance might be, these protests have grown and become more frequent.
These people predict that the judicial changes would turn Israel into a dictatorship like Iran or North Korea.
They're trying to limit the rights of women, of LGBT community, declining equality, anti-Arab, you name it.
Bibi don't want to go to the jail, so he just try to do whatever he can to escape.
This evening, Bibi, as he's known here, gave some ground, going on television to announce a delay in the judicial reforms. It's a partial climb down. Earlier, the pressure on Mr Netanyahu built as all government workers were told by their union to strike, which among other things halted departures from the main airport. But the most important state employees to act during this crisis are pilots in an elite squadron who refused to continue to train, saying they wouldn't defend a dictatorship. By the weekend, so many other military personnel had followed suit, the defence minister warned that Israel's security was at risk, so the government should back down. Mr Netanyahu then sacked the defence minister, angering further a protest movement that has forced him to postpone his reforms, but probably won't be satisfied until he's scrapped his plans completely. John Irvine, News at 10, Jerusalem.
Here, the government today launched a plan it said would stamp out antisocial behaviour after figures showed a record 1.1 million incidents were recorded last year. It wants those who cause criminal damage to be made to put it right and plans to crack down on what it calls nuisance begging too. But campaigners say for all the eye-catching ideas, it fails to tackle many of the root causes of crime.
Motorbike riders causing carnage on Middlesbrough's roads. In another part of the town, children abusing and throwing missiles at shop staff. And in County Durham, arsonists torched 10 cars. The North East is among 16 pilot areas for the government's crackdown on antisocial behaviour.
I do the razor wire every single night.
Parvez's shop on Teesside has been burgled 6 times in 3 years. It took police 3 days to respond to the latest break-in.
They broke the door. There are two guys, pulled the door very hard, kicked the door, and they ran away with the phone. We called the police. Police didn't arrive. They said, this is not emergency for us.
Measures announced today include more officers in crime hotspot areas, tougher fines, and offenders forced to clear up vandalism within 48 hours.
Some communities are being terrorised by vandals and yobs, and that comes after years and years of cuts to neighbourhood policing. So isn't this a problem of your party's own making?
It's not as simple as that. Across the country, come March, we'll see more police officers than we've seen certainly in my lifetime. But even Cleveland, we do still see that challenge, and I do believe we do need more police on the streets. And whilst we're seeing an influx in that, there's more to be had.
Middlesbrough has one of the highest drug death rates of anywhere in England. Homelessness, begging, street crime here is often closely linked to that drugs problem. And until there's more investment in treatment and addiction services, some here warn that the government's plans will do little to address the antisocial behaviour.
Begging's a serious problem in Middlesbrough.
New police powers to target nuisance beggars have been criticised by drug workers here. Peter was addicted to heroin for 20 years and now helps others get off the streets.
These people don't wake up and think, I want to be a beggar today. You know, there's a lot of complex circumstances that led them to this life, and it's really sad, and they need help. They don't need punishing, they need help.
Extra support and swift justice is the government's promise, but critics say they've heard all of this many times before. Sarah Corker, News at 10 in Middlesbrough.
A new pay offer for England's teachers tonight looks likely to be rejected after the country's biggest education union described it as insulting. Striking staff had been demanding above inflation rises. Instead, the government offered a £1,000 cash payment and a 4.3% rise for next year. The NEU says that is less than teachers in Scotland and Wales have been offered. Now, with the DUP still refusing to re-enter government at Stormont, there seems little chance of the Northern Ireland Assembly being back up and running in time to mark the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement, now just a fortnight away. Today, one of its key architects, Sir Tony Blair, told me there may now be a case for reviewing the original agreement. I began by putting it to him that far from the Good Friday Agreement thriving at this point, on this impending historic anniversary, Northern Ireland is in political limbo.
The Good Friday Agreement, I mean, it remains probably one of the, if not the only, successful peace accord of the last quarter of a century. It was always going to be fragile, it remains fragile, but it's held. If you compare Northern Ireland today and how it was during the Troubles that I grew up with, and where you were listening to, news reports of terrorism and assassination and just ugly conflict every day. It's always worth reminding ourselves of where we were so that we understand how important it is to keep it.
What's your message to the DUP then? If you were engaged in negotiating this impasse, what would you be saying to them? And do you have some sympathy for their position?
I've learned enough over the years with the DUP not to try and give heavy-handed advice to them, but I hope they think on balance. Given the vote now in the UK Parliament, it's the right thing to proceed and to be in a situation where that stability that's so crucial for the peace in Northern Ireland can remain.
Your partner in the Good Friday Agreement, Bertie Ahern, has said it may be time to review the Good Friday agreement because of this impasse. It can't be right, given that the Assembly's only sat for 40% of the time in between when the agreement was signed and now, that one party can effectively collapse the Assembly on their say-so. Isn't it time that that was resolved?
People are completely right in saying, look, why should one party have a veto over the whole system? But in the end, there is a good case for reviewing it, but you're only going to get a successful review if everyone is on board.
And one of the questions that inevitably arise, you could have had that legacy as a man of peace. Instead, people regard you through the lens of Iraq. They also look at what's happening in Ukraine. And President Putin has quoted the invasion of Iraq as the point at which regard for international rule broke down. People will see your hand in that too. Do you understand how that shaped the world?
It's very important that, okay, Iraq is a decision, and you can say it's right or wrong, and I would say that the removal of Saddam Hussein, I'd say the world is better off without him. Putin has invaded Ukraine for his own reasons. Of course, it was a very, very difficult situation in Iraq, but in the end, don't let people like Putin away with these excuses. They'll use any excuse.
How helpful is President Biden to this process? The DUP have been quoted saying any heavy-handed US diplomacy will have the opposite effect on them.
I would be extremely surprised if President Biden doesn't come to Northern Ireland and do anything other than advance the process.
And when you gather for the anniversary week, it will be a great moment of reflection and quite a moment for the people of Northern Ireland.
It will be a great moment for Northern Ireland to remember how things were and for all the problems, how much better they are. I mean, there was nothing inevitable about the Good Friday Agreement. You know, in a world where people are very cynical about politics, this is at least one thing you can be not cynical about.
Sir Tony Blair, thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you.
And there's more from my interview with Sir Tony Blair on ITVX, including his views on the current state of Scottish devolution. Just go to itv.com and scroll down to the news section. And as so often, a collision of personalities and of recollections has been playing out before an American court today. The retired eye doctor Terry Sanderson's chance to make his case against Oscar winner Gwyneth Paltrow, both linked by one initial collision on a ski slope in Utah 7 years ago.
Terry Sanderson walked past the movie star he is suing in a Utah courtroom this morning.
Do you swear that...
Took the oath.
Thank you.
And sat down to describe the moment he says Gwyneth Paltrow crashed into him on a ski slope.
I heard something I've never heard at a ski resort, and that was a blood-curdling scream. Just, I can't do it. It was, and then, boom.
In response, there was a smile from the Oscar-winning actress and then a shake of the head. It's her case that Mr. Sanderson crashed into her.
You know, I got hit in my back so hard, and I'm right at my shoulder blades, and it felt like, and was perfectly centered, and the fists and the poles were right there at the bottom of my shoulder blades. Serious, serious smack.
Mr. Sanderson said he was left with broken ribs and a brain injury which damaged his memory and led him to end his relationship with his girlfriend.
I said, I'm not sure I'm going to get back to normal again. And I don't want you to feel like that I'm a crippled vet and you're going to stick it out with me, because I know you would. Half a brain or whatever. I know you would, but don't do it.
Mr. Sanderson is seeking damages of around £250,000. Ms. Paltrow has filed a counterclaim. Geraint Vincent, News at 10.
It is quite the court case, that is it from us for tonight. We'll see you tomorrow. Good night.